Welcome to Shop Talk, presented by Show Chic, where they always put the rider in first place.
Questions, and nice to see some familiar faces, nice to meet new people. And because Feldenkrais might be new to some of you, if you have questions about specific areas that you'd like to improve, whether you had injury or there was something that you've been having difficulty with in your lessons, or something you'd just really like to improve, we believe that with Feldenkrais you can improve basically from the impossible to making it possible, making the possible easy, and then the easy beautiful. So we have this thought that we can really continue to improve ourselves, our bodies, our movement capacity, our ability to learn, and also hopefully well into advanced ages. So I'll be touching on another subject today. The subject is bone density. And yes, we want to have better posture, better seats, better movement, feel more comfortable, but we don't want to run into problems with bone density, and that's an obvious issue for the demographics within the horse world. But we want to be able to make sure that the concussive forces, meaning the bang, bang, bang that we get into our bodies as we ride, has benefit in the sense that we can build more bone density. So if we know what we are doing, we can do what we want. That's one of Dr. Feldenkrais's famous quotes. Now with that, what I would say is that if we know how to take in concussive forces into the skeleton, using our repertoire of movements that we learn off of our horses, all of a sudden the movement comes into your body and gets filtered in a way that's positive instead of creating jarring or shearing forces, which would cause damage instead of nourishing the system with building more bone density. Because more or less the skeleton we have today, in 7 years we have a new version of that. So depending on what we're doing today, the nervous system gets that impulse or that feedback to do something next with that. So this is where it's quite beneficial to keep giving all that information to the nervous system. So yes, the right nutrients and whatnot is important, the right exercise, but we will talk more about the weight bearing and concussive forces through the skeleton in the class. Now, just by a show of hands, who has any pain points that they've had? Okay. Yeah, so all riders, exactly. And anything with the lower back, yeah, it's also common. Hip joints, okay, also common. So usually starting with the lower back, the hip joints, some of us, we get issues with the wrists or with the neck, what have you. There's a lot of different things that happen, and yes, being riders, we've all taken falls. That's just normal, and we'll continue to do that, and that's okay. But knowing that there are things we can do to keep ourselves comfortable, I think that's really positive. It doesn't have to be that we have back pain and we continue to ride. And then for some people, there's a bit that feeling, well, I woke up stiff, I'll just get on my horse and warm up that way. That's fine, but I do believe it would be kinder to ourselves and to the horses if we showed up ready. We want our horses to be supple. We give them all kinds of wonderful blankets we put on them, whether it's magnets or, massages, chiropractor. They get hand walked, all the things that they need to stay supple. So I do believe that if we can take a couple of steps, whether it's something in the morning or if your barn has the ability that you can go sit on a stool and do a little bit of warm-up Feldenkrais, if you will, that's something great. Or maybe after an intense lesson you want to do something at home so that the next day you're able to get up and go and not be stiff. Because otherwise we hold our horses back. And I think we all want to be in a position where our horses are able to move better and bigger, more comfortable, become stronger, more even, more through. All those ideals we're looking for start with us, right? So our position, our seat, our ability to come into basically being in sync with our horses. And from that place, can we then, with our body, communicate to the horses to move better? So it's not about having a perfect seat, it's about having a supple seat. And the idea that we want to be able to use this communication through our bodies to be able to communicate with our horses. So before we begin, any special requests or questions about something that we should try to cover today?
This is a real general question. I know the term Feldenkrais, but I don't know what that means.
Perfect. Thank you for that question. So the Feldenkrais method was invented by Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais, who was a physicist and an engineer, a PhD in both. He was also Europe's first black belt in judo. So amongst many other things, this guy was a real genius. But he was interested in a judo perspective. Why can certain martial artists do different movements, or I suppose difficult movements, and make it look easy? That was a bit of his little obsession, if you will. And he had difficult knees, and at the time he would have required surgery, and 50-50 chances he would have been put into a wheelchair. So he wanted to learn more about, can I rewire my nervous system and avoid surgery? And at the time, the common belief, or the accepted scientific belief, was that, well, past puberty, you can't change any of the wiring. You're done, this is what you've learned. But now we know of something, the term is called neuroplasticity. You can read about it if you're interested. It's the general term that our brain is able to keep learning and improving as we age. Not sure if this is on. So I think we lost the mic here, but that's okay. So the idea would be that the brain can keep going, keep learning. It doesn't matter our age. We have the ability for constant learning, constant improvement. Also with regards to aging, there's a lot of thought that, well, age happens, gravity happens, we lose posture, and we end up with whatever we consider as aging. So Dr. Ruthie Alon, who was a student of Dr. Feldenkrais, she talked about it as people accept the eventual decay of the human body. And those words I think are very strong, but thinking about it in that way, thank you. Thinking about it in that way, that it doesn't have to be that there is eventual decay, and what can we do to prevent that or nourish the system in a way that gravity takes a positive role in our lives. So gravity happens on our horses, their backs can start to sag. We know through correct work and improving their top line, we can really change a lot of that. As for ourselves, gravity is taking place. And if we learn how to deal with what's called the ground forces, that means that when I deposit a leg on the ground, there's a rebound, or for example, I want to stand up. It's the ground forces that gave me that free ride, that there's a push that comes through the ground, as opposed to gravity just taking place and things becoming difficult. So in the Feldenkrais method, we're very interested in making whatever task it is better, easier, more comfortable. It doesn't matter if it's just to be more supple, to have better posture, or in my case, what I do with the Feldenkrais method education is combine that with my trainer's education. And for me, the Feldenkrais method, it always has felt as if this was made for us riders. There's many, many other applications, very successful application, but the lessons, as you'll see in what we do, it makes things easier, it makes things more comfortable, therefore we have better posture, therefore we move better, therefore our horses are happier, So I think that, I hope it answers your question, that it's a big capacity of how we can improve ourselves to do whatever it is we want through movement lessons. We call them awareness through movement lessons. If someone comes to see me or another Feldenkrais practitioner, they're not in the, we don't call them patients. We call them students. And why? Because whatever work we do, whether it's, in a group, privately, the hands-on stuff, it's never considered a treatment. And the classes that we do, they're really classes. So it's about learning to learn. So those are some of the levels of what we're trying to do, is learn better, move better, help ourselves to learn better, move better. And yeah, but I think the best way to learn about it is to experience it. So we will do that. Thank you for that question. Any other questions about something that we can improve, or if you have any trouble areas that we should try to tackle today? Any special requests? Go ahead, please.
Asymmetry on the board.
Yes.
Collapsing on one side, sitting more heavily on the T-bone.
Yep.
Having one leg that's deeper in the stirrup and one leg that sort of pops up.
Yep.
It's sort of something I'm struggling with.
Okay, I think we can do something with that as well today.
That's what I thought.
We will touch on that subject today as well then. Any other questions or special requests before we begin? Go ahead, please.
This is something that's like iterative, like you have to start with some basic foundation of the movements and then work your way up to other points, or can you literally just start with a problem area and work on that?
That's a good question. We try to avoid very direct going into the problem, and the reason for that is since the thought or preoccupation is how we learn. So if we're now already thinking there's something difficult or it hurts, all that distracts from learning. So a lot of the learning is based on how children learn, how toddlers learn through experimentation, rolling, having fun, trying things, and oh, that was easy. And that's the message that we want to give, never that of struggle or pain. So we have these movement lessons that are based on the pieces, if you will, of human movement. So whether it has to do in a situation of collapsing, so side bend is what's happening, right? So side bend in the horse or in ourselves, and really trying to struggle against it, then it's a lot of muscling. And we don't believe that that works. And you're talking about this because it's difficult. Sure, strong will, strong muscles, we can do something. But what we do with that, and I will teach a short lesson based on that theme so that you can see the difference or thought of how we would learn. But a very quick lesson that I think we can do, a short little experiment so that everyone can see how this actually works. Would you please make yourselves comfortable, maybe at the edge of the chair, wherever it is that you're sitting. If you're standing, you can also do this standing. So once sitting up comfortably, we'll just do a little bit of what we call a scan. So that means taking in some inventory. If you want to close your eyes to do that, if that helps you, that's fine. So the questions you can ask yourselves in sitting: how do I like to sit today at the moment? A lot of it depends on the height of the chair, the shape of the chair, who's sitting next to you, where do you like to look. Now we can check in with our pelvis and the seat bones. Do I have a preference to sit a little bit more to the right or to the left? And is that something that you know from your riding lessons, or perhaps it's something new that you experienced today? What about your feet, your legs? How do they take contact with the ground? Where the knees point? And the shoulder height, the length of your spine in general. And how comfortable are you? And if you want to sit a little slouched, that's fine. If you want to sit upright, what are you doing when you do you today? So we have our baseline, and now let's do a little reference movement. I won't specify, But if you were to look behind you slowly, choose one side, right or left, left or right, and see how far can you look behind you. And come back to your starting point, the middle. And we'll do that one more time in the same direction, or maybe 2 or 3 more times. And the question is to learn or locate, how do I turn? What's easy about how I turn? Not looking for the stiffness or what's restrictive. And then let's see, what is our range? So how far behind me can I look without stretching or working hard? So once everyone's felt that, choose a marker. Where was that? And now let's check to the other side. Most likely your first initial side will have more movement. That's usually because our nervous system knows to do what is easy. It might not be the case, but most likely. So once you've noticed how far can I look to my first side, how far can I look to the second choice, which, as I said, is most likely there would be less range of motion or less options. Let's choose which one do we want to improve, so that you will see already where something differs. So I will say, for example, in my case, my first thought would be turn to the right. And even without knowing that, I know that my range would be bigger to the right. And then to the left, it's a bit more limited as a baseline. So from there, I guess the thought would be as well, I should improve the left one. In Feldenkrais, we do things a little different. I'm going to improve, or ask you to try to improve the side that's already more optimal or better. So it's not about fixing anything. We just notice what is better, what can we measure is having more quality of movement, more softness, more ease, all the things that we're looking for in our riding that we call feeling. So using your feeling, we will try to improve the already better side. So if your first turning to the right was what you did, let's do right. If it's left, it's left. Go ahead.
Do you want us to move our head and neck or our shoulders as well?
Everything, anything and everything, yes. Yes.
Okay.
But we will get to that, and deliberately the question was about turning, right? So most people will notice that they limit turning or movement of the neck to the neck only, and now we're going to invite pieces of the whole puzzle. So if you're not sure after this last question, turn to your easy side one more time. How far can you look? Okay, so we have that as our baseline. Now, please continue to look straight ahead. We're going to imagine that you have a camera on your sternum, somewhere in the middle of your chest, and on your abdomen. Place your hands, if you are sitting, on your thighs. And I won't specify, so you're now going to limit the turning from your head and your eyes. But if you're turning to the right, for example, everything else will turn, but not the head and the eyes. So I'll just give a little reminder to keep looking towards your front, whatever that is. So you're looking towards straight ahead, and you turn your chest, you can turn your pelvis, one hip goes forward, one hip goes back. If you are standing, one elbow goes back, one elbow's forward, and you come back to the middle. So do that again, limiting the ability to turn. So for example, if you're turning to the right, take your right hand and block the movement of your head and still try to spiral or turn as if you wanted to turn. So you're creating a riddle for your brain that says, the hand says, no, you can't, and the rest of you says, yes, I'd like to look behind me. So try to give that a one hip forward, one hip back, one hand forward, one elbow back, and come back to the middle. Still keeping your eyes straight ahead. Focus on the hand sliding. Slide one hand forward and one back. And turn your spine, swivel, but keep your head in the middle. Okay, back to the middle. Last experiment, keep your eyes looking straight ahead, but turn everything, including the head. also to that same the same first side. So not switching sides. And then come back to the middle. And we remember where we could see and look earlier. How far can you look now? Okay, so bless you. Many of you might have experienced some improvement, but in our work, we really try not to push people into saying, yes, yes, you improved, you're better. So this is why I say, yes, many of you might have experienced something. Some of you might say, well, I didn't experience anything. But now, let's check the other side. Did the learning or the lesson of one hip forward, one hip back, the resistance that we created, is it easier or a bigger range to the side that needed improvement? I would say maybe and maybe not. But most likely yes. I want to say yes, but I also don't want to pressure people into feeling that, well, now you're better. That's a big piece of, we know each other well, so this is why we can laugh about this. And I'm careful to not give people the feeling that, yes, you will improve, but yes, I would like to say, yes, you will improve, because I believe in it that much. Go ahead, please.
So the little bit of Feldenkrais I've done at a gym with a Feldenkrais therapist, how much of this is related to the brain and the physical part? Like sometimes it would feel like, first I get distracted, but a lot of the time I feel like, well, am I really doing anything?
Yeah.
And that's the piece that I struggle with in Feldenkrais.
Yeah. It is difficult for those who feel, and this is not saying that that's you, but it's difficult in the type of work that we're used to, that we put in this work, therefore we get a certain output. I would say the only way to really know for yourselves is to actually give it an honest try by not working hard and also removing yourself from the expectation. So all I can say is that it most probably will help. In my experience, especially with riders who have a lot of feeling to begin with, it's a very easy translation to better riding, more feeling. Barbara, go ahead.
I've done a lot of work with Dave, and I can reflect upon my first sessions where I'd done a lot of Pilates, I've done a lot of Pilates, I've done a lot of exercise. And so I brought that mindset. I'm a really hard worker. I think all of you here are really hard workers. That's why we ride, that's who we are, that's why we're able to be here. And that is a mentality that kind of ruined my first couple of months of Feldenkrais. Because I'd listen to him, because I was doing it all Zoom, it was during COVID, and I'd be like, what is he talking about? And I would do every movement to the max. Mm-hmm. So it was this kind of, if that's Feldenkrais, I can have Feldenkrais myself. And it was, I think back and I laugh and everything else, but at the time I thought, I don't really know if this is helping me, blah, 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 blah. And the breakthrough for me was trust. So you kind of have to trust him. And challenging myself to do very little. Mm-hmm. So, and when I think about it, I'm sure most of you are better riders than I am, but I'm trying to make that move up to 4th level pre-St. George, and what I struggle with is feeling and small movements and the sensitivity, because you can't just kick them into it. So I'm sorry I went on and on a little bit.
No, I love it. Thank you.
The sense of when you're trying to get fine movements out of your horse, you need to pull fine movements out of you. Mm-hmm. And this is the only thing I've done that I feel, I'm not there, but it's helping. And it's giving me just another set of feel tools.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Barbara.
I wasn't paid for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yes, she had mentioned that a couple of times to me in the beginning, that you know, this is really hard for me to let go that much to see that is this going to work. And my answer is usually mostly the same, sort of give it a try. You know, worst case, you're relaxed after you do these lessons. Maybe you want to sleep. You might even find it boring. But if you can come out of this being able to do less with your bodies and communicate with your horses better in that way that we all wish to, that's something I really want to share with everybody. It doesn't matter whatever level you're at. I think we all want to ride our horses better. And by better, I'm also not saying this objective, have a better seat, work harder, or even a certain percentage. Sure, there's certain clients that I work with that are, you know, Olympic riders, and then it all matters about the small details. But for the most part, for everybody, just to improve their seat and have more communication and more comfort in their bodies, I think there's really not much to lose. And then you learn about your anatomy in a way that's very different from reading a book or learning about anatomy. So the thought is, we do these lessons. Right now, we just did movements around spiraling. We also worked with, yes, it was a brain riddle, but for the fact is that as you turn one hand back, and you'll notice if you watch me, there's a spiral, there's a clear spiral. So we'll talk about that. So spirals in nature, if you talk about it as a physics point of view, learning how to bring movement through us in a spiral gives a certain elegance. It also gives power. So whether we're talking about the spirals in canter, you know, these are the little things that you learn. I can't easily describe all of them today because it was a 4-year professional learning for me to learn how to help share and teach this to you. But more or less, I can tell you that most likely it will work. And, you know, if it doesn't, that's okay
Well,
also.
I think I was like trying to think about the brain connection.
Oh, yes.
The interruption of the brain and the distraction of the brain versus feeling the body.
Yes.
Like, I wonder if Feldenkrais addresses that.
Yes, because it's working with a very different way of learning. It's going back to that toddler learning instead of us growing up and now reading books, listening to people, which is all wonderful. But if you think about it, the speed of acceleration of how babies learn, it worked. We all learned that way. Sure, we stopped using those tools. And for some of us, you know, being in a lesson where we have to interpret what we're being told and feel and produce all at the same time, it's difficult. You know, it's also the same as that we're now in front of being judged. So I think a lot of the tools we learn is this ability to know what is good for us, what is good for me at the moment, good for my horse. How can I best take in these words that I'm hearing, or how can I deal with the anxiety? Because Dr. Feldenkrais, coming back to the brain thought, he doesn't separate the body from the brain. And this was a very early thought at that point. The mind-body connection was not very normal in his age. But he did not feel that anything was separate. So we're talking about, you know, our caveman ancestors, whether we use our eyes in a certain way because we're nervous, we hold our breath, we want to protect our abdomen, anything that's going into that fetal position, and why coming into a different posture, you can change the emotion or even your belief in yourself. So let's everyone take a little standing observation. Let's see how it is to stand. And if you feel awkward with your eyes and would like to look somewhere else, that's fine. I'm lucky I see right over everybody else. So just notice, where do you feel you are today? And by that I mean, if you were to take rub your foot in ink and then try to see how is it to the left, how is it to the right, what's the shape, what's the weight of each foot, where do your toes point, what's the height of your shoulders, what's my side profile? A lot of people aren't sure what their side profile looks like or even what they look like from behind. So let me see you from the side, please, just to get a inventory. Yes, and you can look around, see what your friends look like now, what they'll look like in a little bit. And how comfortable, and this is not to push any buttons, but how confident are you in your posture? Because the posture and the motions go together, does it feel like inner uprightness? And that's the word that I want to come back to later. Please have a seat again. So, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, because you asked about the brain, that you
Yeah, sure.
mentioned one time a really good book, The Brain That Heals Itself. And there are two versions by the same author. I think one is The Brain That Changes Itself, and the other is The Brain That Heals Itself. And it's full of case studies, and Feldenkrais is mentioned in it, but it's a fantastic book and talks about that.
Thank you for sharing that. So yes, if any of you are interested in the science of it, absolutely those books by Dr. Norman Doidge. And yes, there's a whole chapter on Feldenkrais, and he talks about how you can actually improve and change, but on that level of the brain that heals itself. But taking that model, and we look further, what can you do with this work when you have none of those difficulties, and we just want to improve? And that's where we see athletes at the highest levels using this work to do that very thing. So thank you. Okay, so a little bit movement exploration right now. So sitting back again in your chair, would everyone just locate their pelvis, the top of their pelvis, the back, and where are your hip joints? So this, in the years of work, it's very rare that I get a group of people who know where their hip joints are. May I use you as a demo, since I think everyone can see you and you're pointing at the right place? Is that okay? Okay. So she's pointing at more or less the right place where the hip joints are. What's her name?
Claudia.
Claudia, thank you. Appreciate that. So a lot of people will point at their hip joints where they think the hips are for pants. So that's not the hip joint. So if you follow and trace your femur, your thigh bone, it comes in towards your midline, and then you have a ball that goes into a socket. So it's a ball and socket. So you can experiment with that. You can make a fist and move this imaginary ball in the socket. And that's what's happening within your hip joint as we ride. So there's all kinds of movements that are available. In my case, I actually have a deformity that the ball and socket don't fit together. So in fact, the only thing there should be to alleviate pain is surgery. So I have not had surgery and I have no pain. So that's one of my personal success stories, and I also have no limited range of motion when it comes to the hip joints. So with the hip joint in mind, thinking about where your pelvis is, now please locate your tailbone. Would you gently look up towards the ceiling, thinking about arching your back, and then come back to your starting point. Now bring your focus back to your pelvis. Imagine a bowl of soup that we tip slightly forward, and you look up, and then you come back to the middle. And how would it be to tip this bowl of soup backwards? So your belt buckle comes towards your spine, you can round your back. Out in front of you would be easy to hug, an imaginary tree or whatever it is you want to think about. And then come up again in the other way, which is a little bit like you're bending backwards, arching your back, and then come back to the middle. What would be absent of arching the back or rounding the spine? Where's the middle? Can you find your middle? And once you find your middle, can you now move in a smaller nuance of what we just played with? So I will suggest, think of your tailbone coming a bit under, like a dog tucking its tail under, and then roll on your seat bones. I was talking to one of the riders earlier about seat bones. The seat bones are like rockers. So you can rock on them And if we rock to the back of the seat bones, we round ourselves and come lower. And if you arch and roll to the front of the seat bones, you're now into what we call extension versus flexion. Come back to the middle, please. Just find your middle. Raise both arms and look up to the ceiling. You'll notice that your back muscles engage. These are the anti-gravity muscles, the extensors. And I'll say it again, the anti-gravity muscles. Come back to the middle, leave your arms. Maybe place your hands on your head and think about doing a sit-up and round your back. And now your back is long, but it's passively lengthened. We're engaging the front of us, which are the flexors. Come back to the middle and leave your arms. Maybe think about taking contact. Do a little bit of an imaginary walk where you think about moving with your horse, following your horse. And is there a moment that your spine goes into extension? Maybe, maybe not. If you don't use extension, you might be slouching. But the movement of the horse coming through you and then back, so nothing is permanent. You won't stay arched and live up there. You're just moving your spine with the horse. Your elbows will follow. Maybe you think about making a U shape with your pelvis. Maybe you make a V shape. And something that you can move within this flexion and extension, but preferably more into extension just because of the look of our sport. We don't want to end up going into, and then we pull on the mouth, right? So following extension, extension, extension. Okay, pause for a moment. Let's stand up, see if we feel a little different. Where do you like to look now? What's the length of your spine? Raise one arm, look up. Did you shift weight when you did that? Try the other arm. Which leg do you shift on to look at your hand? And come back to look straight ahead. Are we looking in a different place right now? What's the length of our spine, the height of our heads? Do we feel a little bit taller? Do we feel connected to the ground? Yes, please have a seat again. So that was to clarify flexors and extensors. We don't talk about muscles a lot, but these two major groups are very important. And why are they important? So if we think of in nature, when an animal is under attack, what do? Flight would definitely be the case with our horses. And in their case, on a four-legged animal, they're going to arch their back like this and use their back muscles that tells them, run, so there's a problem. Humans, if we think about what do we do if, for example, there's a boulder coming down on our heads, right? So give it a try. What do? Do you go into extension or flexion? Okay. There's an arrow coming at us. Protect everything, right? Something coming to bite the throat latch. All of that has to do with closing. And if we think of some unpleasant imagery of someone going through a tough time, sitting under, in a closet, that type of sobbing type posture, the emotions that go with that, nothing is good. And it's now basically, unfortunately, putting the system, whether it comes from eyes that stare, or whoops, throat latch, or whoops, I have to hold myself there, anything closing tells our nervous system that we are in possibility of danger, therefore fight, flight, freeze, or roll over. So the horses are so wired to this that if, for example, one of their friends is chewing and eating and stiffens its back to look up and look around, the other horses know that something's wrong, whether they see that horse or not. We're sitting right on top of them. So ideally, we start with a neutral place, the saddle's comfortable, the horse is comfortable, and if we get on, and for whatever reason, we had a stressful day, or maybe we're misled into thinking that strong abs, in the sense of if you wanted to chop wood, was a good idea, then you're in your flexors. I'm not saying that there's not a good interplay with the flexors and extensors, but I'll repeat that the anti-gravity muscles are the back muscles. And when we want to be upright and have the anti-gravity muscles to work, then there becomes a difference of language and opinion. So my formal education was in Germany, and you always hear that in the writing in Germany talking about writing with your back. Your back, your back, your back. There's not a lot of talk about using your abdomen. Yes, you can have that lean look. Yes, you can pull yourself up. But what we're looking for, please sit on the edge of your chairs again, is that absence of being in flexion or extension, therefore neutral, and therefore you're free with your hips, free with your abdomen, free with your breathing, and you can adapt to what the horse will do next. Let's play with some other thoughts now. Please take one hand or one fist behind you and push into the table and see what happens to your spine when you do that, or the chair or whatever, anywhere on the side of you or behind you. If you push a fist in, do you get taller or rounder? Okay, let's try the other way. Push and see if there's any rotation in the spine. We talked about spiraling or rotation. Okay, use both hands and push your feet into the ground slightly, and you get taller. Yes, and let go. So when you're riding, these forces in a similar way come through you, and then you filter them by not gripping with the thighs, by not pulling back with the hands. So the interruption that happens often with the inner thighs, this has to do with closing posture of anything for whatever reason, but it has to do with the flexion response, which is closing. So what's the opposite of that? You've probably all heard of stories about interviews, job interviews, and people going into what they might call a power pose with the, so let's put your arms up. And there was actually there was a study on this that, so everyone their arms up in the shape of the letter X or Y, and the belly free. This is something that society tells us not to do, but everyone please belly out. In formal riding instruction you often hear, let the belt buckle lead the way. Bend your back a little bit, open the throat latch, let the belly be free. The throat latch is free, the shoulders are relaxed. And think about how you feel in this posture versus a closed posture. And come back to sitting. Where do you land? Landmarks we can think about, the shoulder joints and the hips. Think of making the letter X across your front, and also the same behind. Make your front X bigger, however you know. Let the knees open, let the belly out, and come back to the middle. So this study that they did interviews, and they wanted to see who got the job based on the posture. And for sure, it was the ones that were all hired were the ones that were in extension versus the closed flexion people. And this was invisible. This is without seeing the people being interviewed. They could hear it in the voice, how it comes across, the confidence levels. So I do believe that our horses need to have that feeling that we're confident in what we're doing. Even though that we're not always right, being a leader for them requires that we feel confident in the system of what we're doing. We also don't inadvertently do things with our flexors or our eyes or our jaw that tells them, well, you better be worried. And I think if you're in that place that you're comfortable, you're neutral, your starting point is at a true, what we like to call zero, then you can measure whatever it is that you do out of that zero and return to that zero. So then you know if your horse is crooked or yourself, you're crooked or whatnot. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this question about sitting a bit to the right or to the left. Feel your seat bones now when you sit at the edge of your chair. Is it different from what we did earlier? Are they a little sharper, a bit more clear? Do you feel more upright without working? It's quite fascinating looking around the room. We have very, very easy upright postures. And I would like to call this inner uprightness, because it's not that somebody said, well, now sit up and we're working. Okay, so using a couple of other tools about measuring asymmetries. We talked about our shoulder points. We talked now about the hip joints. And let's please raise one arm, it doesn't matter which one. Look at your hand and reach over as if you wanted to reach through your fingers and come back. Bring it down. Do it again and deliberately try to shift your weight onto that same seat bone. And in order to do that, you end up shortening slightly in the ribs on the opposite side. Yeah? The other way to do it would be, for example, of reaching and then leaning to the opposite side. So that would be, for example, someone doing a half pass and sitting to the outside, or the saddle sliding to the outside in a circle because of the centrifugal forces or whatever. So the other option is, please think of a monkey now, reaching from branch to branch. Now please switch branch to branch. Keep switching. And you're pushing from one, you lift one hip off the wood you're sitting on and come back to just being right there. Another way to feel and experiment with this is if you shift your weight to the inside. So we hear a lot about sit to the inside, don't collapse, sit in the middle, of course, all these things, but what is the middle and what is the inside? In the case of anything to my left, if I'm traveling with the horse bent left or flexed left, all of that is the inside. To the right, if I'm doing anything to the right. But now I have the choice whether I'm sitting forward to the inside, the middle to the inside, the back to the inside, and all of this means something else. So in classical riding, we learn, for example, in leg yield, I will explain, if you're sitting on a clock with 12 at the front of you, the 6 is behind, to leg yield or spiral out towards making a circle left bigger, we would sit back to the left. So let's all think about that on our clock. And why do we do that? That's the moment when that hind leg can cross, our hip will drop, and that's when we can apply the leg aid at the right time. And that's because we can allow one hip joint to drop, and we've learned to lengthen to the inside and not collapse, right? So inversely, if we're doing a leg yield or spiral out while we track right, then it's the right hip joint that goes down. If you watch the rider, you would see that the inside leg sort of drops as the barrel of the horse swings, right? So all it is the even ability to move your hips one at a time while keeping long where you wish to and not doing things like reaching across like that. Okay, and another thing that we can think about is to the inside, whether if you're now doing a half pass, you would be sitting forward to the inside. So in the case of a half pass left, you're now sitting more over your knee, and that would be on a clock 10 o'clock to the left or to the right than we have, or 2 o'clock. Something like 3 o'clock for your shoulder ends, vice versa. So you get all these little tools that we can do with our pelvic clock. So we're going to continue with the pelvic clock one more time. We already did 12 and 6 before without calling it pelvic clock. Imagine you're sitting on a clock, and please roll your pelvis, your seat bones onto the front, onto 12, your bowl of soup, and come back to the back of your clock towards 6, back to 12. And now what we'll do is hands behind you on the chair, sort of lean on them so that the shape of your spine is leaning backwards. And now can you do a 12 and a 6 while you look either up or vertical straight. So the 12 and the 6 movement isn't pulling you into flexion and extension. So this is an important movement for a half halt. The USDF book called Anatomy of Dressage, written by 2 German doctors, they talk about the half halt as lift the pubic bone, but in order to override the flexion response, lean the weight of your rib basket backwards. So your rib cage leans backwards, or you think about leaning onto your elbows or your arms. So please stay on your elbows, on your arms. You're slightly backwards in your posture, and you can move down below without it all affecting the whole body. Yes, there's this rippling effect through the spine, but we really want to have this mobility in the lower back. Now please imagine to take your contact. And you have your real arms, of course, taking your contact, and you all know how the length of reins you wish to have, the thoughts you wish to have, how to follow the mouth. But can you imagine you have a second set of arms to lean on still? And keep your real arms. So I think dressage today, they talked about an open parachute behind you. So it's the same type of ideas. It's using your back. And then you can move with your lower back or your flexors and your extensors. And that's one option. But usually the problem that most adult amateurs have is that they're tipping too much forward or they're in their extensors. To learn to use their back is usually one of the first stages of, I would say, classical riding. If we had the privilege to have seat lessons, lunge lessons in Europe, one of the first things they do is learn to drop the leg, get the belt buckle in front, keep your back, using your back, let go of the abdomen, follow with the hands, look up. So all of that is sort of your basic seat. From there, you can decide to sit more vertical and pull upwards, so then you would have a bit more tone on you, depending on the gait that you're using. But I think for the starting point, to have the belt buckle in front, using the extensors, letting the legs hang, and if we think about what do we think of a stereotypically correct European seat where you would have a lunge lesson, I think we all more or less know the answer. Depending on the horse, of course, if their back is strong enough and all these things, or if the horse is safe and you don't have to be worried about the horse exploding, just thinking about those things. But that little experiment was not just about pelvic mobility, it was learning about how to use your back. Also related, there was a Danish study, but Dr. Hilary Clayton was involved with, and they did some tests, and they found out that the horses much preferred riders that had pelvic mobility over core strength. The horses did not like the riders with core strength. They said, no, thank you. So what they wanted was movement of the pelvis. And I talked in great detail with Dr. Clayton about this, and she was surprised. She thought that the horses would say, oh, well, I like you better because you have core strength, but she found that the core strength, or her research showed her, the core strength got in the way of pelvic mobility. And if you want to try that yourself, so sit now at the front of your chairs, do your pelvic mobility thing with your hip joints, but leave your abdomen free. Think about your belly button or your belly in your lap almost. And now hold your abdomen in, tighten it very tightly, and try to move your hip joints. Do you move more or less?
Less.
Yeah. So I think changing the tone, depending on what you need. For example, if you want to move less, because if you follow, you end up pushing in some cases. So we don't want that, then a little bit more tone. If the horse wants you to sit a little bit more upright, then you add a little tone. But the difficulty is, it's not a constant contraction. It's a contract, release, and there's that play. So the German textbooks, they show the pelvis with some wheels and some arrows, but never do they say that the arrow's this way or this way. They say that there's options, right? And in Feldenkrais, our answer to everything, 1, it depends. 2, it's the pelvis. Okay, so please stand up and just see where you are and take a bit of a walk, and we'll take maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll do a couple more experiments on the bone density stuff.
Well, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
I have scoliosis and a twist.
Yes.
I'm always, no.
Okay.
I'm always fighting against, it's subconscious fighting against it.
And on the other leg. I know there's not a lot of room here. Barbara, could I ask you to just experiment with a walk and then give us some feedback if you walk towards the exit? And do you feel any of this push off from behind and reach as you walk? Possibly, maybe not. Yes, I see it. Thank you. Perfect. So right there, what we were expecting, thank you for letting me put you on the spot. So when we practice this, in this case, we're walking. When you go for a walk, the back foot is going to be the push-off leg. It's just like our horses. In the hind legs, one will carry and one will push. So the back one is the pushing and the other one is the carrying. and now we can end up being over that in balance. Okay, now what we're going to do in this case is we're going to change the natural curves of our spine deliberately. So earlier we were doing a lot of arching and changing the shape of our spine by bending. Would everyone please grab some skin under the belly button and pull upwards? And by doing that, we flatten the lower back. So let go of the abdomen, place one hand on your lower back like this, and take the free hand and pull upwards, and notice how it changes the shape of your lower back. What's also interesting, it's not the case for everybody, but this curve of the neck and the lower back should mirror each other. So if you watch me, as I do this movement, I get longer through the back of my neck. And if I let go of the abdomen forward, my head will tip back. So try to experiment with that. Deliberately, have the belly forward and tip your head back. Pull the abdomen up, your chin sort of comes in, you get on the bit sort of, and let go. All right, everyone promise to not shake hands with your left hand after or touch anything, but your left index finger in your mouth as a bit. And see if you can think about pulling up and lengthening through the back of your head. So what we've done is taken out the natural curves of the spine and let go. So that actually has some purpose. So for example, you're on a horse, and if you think of the old days of the top hats, how would it look, or even the helmet. So for example, if you put one leg forward, one leg back, left leg forward maybe, and we think about cantering. What's the movement of the canter? So yes, there's that scooping movement we know about. There's this lifting coming up through us. And maybe there's a spiral. Can you turn that into a spiral and keep yourself on the bit? You can do it with the left hand or just think about it. You can pull the skin up on your lower abdomen. The other version, a bit more deep-seated, a bit more old-fashioned, if you will, but maybe suitable for different choices, would be bend your back. So bending your back, having your hips forward, and moving the canter that way. So then, yes, you might be told by your instructor, don't shove with your hips, don't move your shoulders, sit more upright. So the question here is, how do you filter the movement? So usually the more advanced you are, the more upper levels you are, the more self-carriage your horse needs to be in, the more you'll be pulling up through the horse's movement and filtering the movement that way. So yes, you would lengthen through your skeleton. Place one hand on top of your head and think about scrunching yourself with one hand, but don't allow it. What would you do? Would you lengthen through the back of your neck in order to push against that compression? Yeah. Yes. So now place both hands on top of your head and do the same type of thing and think, how can I lengthen my spine without overarching? Yeah. I want to lengthen, so you can think about pulling there. Very good. Think about being on the bit. You don't have to do that anymore. You can think about the chin coming a bit back. So we've taken the natural curves out, and now we're going to put concussion into the system. So we're going to do this double bounce and bang, bang, or pum, pum, the heart beating. There's another reason for that. We don't have to go over that. And you're keeping yourself sort of like a jack-in-the-box, but you're deliberately trying to think of using concussion through you. So really hitting the ground and keeping your alignment gently and comfortably. Barbara, could we do one more last demo? Is that okay? So she knows this, so that's why it's easy. Can we see you from the front and the side? Very good. So she's repeating it. Very good. Well done. Perfect. Thank you. So everyone try that a bit more, and you're thinking about so you get concussion coming through you, and you have opposing forces. So in the sense that you're trying to push your helmet down or your head down, and you say no taller, and now this bang bang that comes through you, if you were in this bent backward seat, the movement goes through your abdomen out front. But now you're bringing the movement into a vertical plane, whether you do it slightly diagonal for a passage or into a twist for a canter. you're working with using your seat more like a suction cup. Okay, so keep trying that. And the double bang. Good. And please see where you are now. Just see if you feel more upright. A little bit more that you could have a crown on your head. Maybe look at your friends, look around. Why is this that we all have wonderful posture now? Yeah, so we've lengthened through our system. And this, I told this story during class last week, and it's really true. I go to a chiropractor twice a year or so. And not long ago, I had the chiropractor tell me, wow, did you grow? And I just laughed it off, and he was serious. And I realized that he was standing there looking like he had lost an inch or two in his height. It's just because it happens. So we're taking out spinal compression. And that is a true thing that we can do. Of course, things will happen that you can't actually change. But lengthening through the system, bringing concussion into your system. This is the theme of, I think, a very important topic. It's that bone density we were talking about. And why is it so important? We're going to fall. And, in a predominantly female sport, that becomes a concern that nobody wants to now worry about bone density loss. So this program that I'm just touching on right now, it's called Bones for Life. It was developed by Dr. Ruthie Alon. And her research took her to the African tribal women who carried things on their head. So now take your hands or on your head again, or pretend to be carrying something heavy. And when you take that posture, it doesn't matter if it's something light or heavy on your head or a crown, it's very intuitive to put yourself on the bit and have that counter pressure. So what she discovered was, well, these ladies, it can't be the calcium. It has to do with aligning the skeleton and feeding the system with concussive forces, but because they have this heavy thing pressing through them, they now come against gravity, or they win the battle against gravity. And you feed the nervous system with that impulse coming through you, with the right bang, bang, bang coming through you, and then you have stronger bones. So that's the theory behind the concussive forces. But it also teaches us as riders to now sit there and filter movement that looks like, oh, that rider doesn't move when they ride. Oh, they sit so well, so upright. And it's just so natural for them. All these things start to happen when you've learned to filter movement. So on that note, I will say that's the end of class for today. Thank you very much. Of course, I'll answer questions if you have them. Oh, go ahead. The stretching thing, yes. So we talked a bit about stretching earlier. We in Feldenkrais, again, back to that thought about the puppet and the strings, right? So if the brain is the control center, if you go and you move the strings. I'm not saying, because this is a difference of opinion, different from a lot of people. The brain is potentially going to decide, well, I wanted that to be arranged this way, and now it's been changed. Why? Whether it decides that, oh, that was a good piece of information and I will adopt to that and leave it that way, or will the brain decide that, I thought that that piece needed to be shortened or lengthened, and it's now been rearranged, so I better do it even more. So that's the thought behind stretching that might potentially backfire. But I don't want to say very strongly that we don't believe in stretching. We want to be able to reorganize all these things to find the symmetry. I can tell you that I had chronically tight hamstrings. I do no stretching, no hip flexors, nothing, and I have no tension. The days that I used to do a lot of stretching, and I tried all kinds of things when I was in a lot of pain, it did not work. And when this thought came to me that in Feldenkrais we try without the stretching, I was very attached to my stretching at the time. This is about 20 years ago. And I thought I would give it a try, and it worked for me. But if you feel comfortable with stretching stretching is sort of a loose term. If you end up longer and looser and easier and less conflicting messages on the skeleton, or easier movement, then we're happy. So it doesn't matter if it comes from Feldenkrais, Tai Chi, yoga, swimming. These are the types of movement modalities that I think will sometimes give very similar outputs. So you don't have to do Feldenkrais, but I do believe a lot more strenuous things like Pilates or really stretching. It's not going to be exactly the same. So again, Tai Chi, soft yoga, swimming, movement, things that just give you that ease and comfort of movement. Any other questions? Go ahead. Yep. Yeah, so with the hip flexors, I think often it has to do with this poor balance between the flexors and extensors. And you can imagine that if you want to be in your flexors, but at the same time you don't want to be in a chair seat, there's already something conflicting. But if you can allow yourself to let go of the abdomen, and then you're opening that hip angle that the saddles try to do. So first of all, the saddle would be important, the shape of the horse, how hard you're working. Usually something that's conflicting or working too much is where the pain goes. So if you're ending up with either the stirrup might be too long and you're getting a pull over and over, or you're doing something that, like I said, that the abdomen is coming in a way that should put you in a chair seat, but then you decide to work against that, but you're still in a hole. So it's hard to say what the reasons are. You could alleviate the pain without me or someone looking at you on your horse. So of course, if you're in Wellington, I can help you with that. We could try to troubleshoot and come up with a thought where it's coming from. Usually it has to do with some kind of misunderstanding in the relationship of the hip joint and flexors and extensors. And sometimes it's as simple as getting more movement in the ankle. And why is that important is that if our ankle is locked in this sort of heels down position, you're smiling, I think you have the answer. So,
and it's usually lateral.
Yeah, so something like that, and and I haven't seen you ride, but if the heel is a bit locked and you're tense there, and then you get very intent on I will move from here to there, sideways, and the eyes focus, that's enough to probably do that. But yes, I would definitely do the movements outside of the saddle, because then you'll, on your own, start to change, rather than, well, somebody should come and now tell me what to do. And you then become a better judge at finding what's better and more comfortable. So before I go further with that, if you wanted to try, I have 2 online programs on my website. One is a 14-day course, and one is a 60-day program. The 14-day course would probably give you relief with the hip flexors. It's to do with softening the hips. It's the balancing of the flexors and extensors. And the New Year sale is on until today. Sorry, I didn't mean, this was not meant that way, but it was until the 21st, and it's extended to the 31st. So then the bigger program is also, so those are the choices if people wanted to explore that stuff. And then if you wanted to do more with the bone density, I've been lucky enough to find space next door, and I'll be sending some information out to you if you wish, but that will be coming out shortly. I'll be doing an online version, but also one here in Wellington. So it's going to be 3 Mondays in February and in March, and the theme specifically on the bone density and all of that. All the lessons go together, so yes, you have to do all of them. Go ahead.
How can we find out about the Monday?
I will send out an email if that's okay. And I have, again, the option, I'll be doing an online version, so students from all over the place join. But I think it's a really good and unique opportunity to be together, especially when we were forced to do everything online. When I have the potential or opportunity to work with people, but we got to work together years ago before COVID
and
a bit.
I have to say that, and I'm at fault because I don't practice. And what you were saying earlier about the body wants to do what's easier, and the more you show it, this way, it will eventually move towards that. I don't do enough Feldenkrais, so my default goes back to my asymmetries. But the session I did with you that had the most impact on me and my writing was the in-person session.
Wonderful.
Oh, it was,
Yeah.
the next day it felt so good, Gerard. But I have a question about the 14-day course. Is that synchronous, or can you tune in, can one tune in?
Yeah,
like,
good question. So the 14-day course, the reason I have it packaged like that is, short enough that people can say, let me give this a go and get some results. And it's a challenge specifically, so yes, you get all the Feldenkrais stuff, which is stay away from the goals, but let's now get our hips moving better, balance the flexors and extensors, maybe get better rides. And there's 5 lessons in there, what we call awareness through movement lessons. And you have ideally 2 weeks to go through it for the first time. You could do it in a week. I just don't recommend that because it's so much information that you don't get to absorb and go ride and try things, and then the next step. But a lot of people just keep doing the lessons. And in fact, the 60-day program, the first module, you just stick with the first module. I get this all the time. I have
All of them, the whole 60-day, I cycle through them like over and over and over and over.
Wonderful. And and I keep hearing from people that, this time I did it and I got different information, and you cycle through it. So in fact, you can, if you like it, you can then do it again and again and again. Or some people just say, I love module 1, I'm sticking with that. That's the 14-day one, and that's the easy one. A lot of pelvic clock, just explaining what it is. So I would recommend at least the 14-day to anybody who's at all curious with this, because those lessons specifically will help just about any rider enough that you could say, well, I tried it, and then if you want to do more, or if you want to do the bone density stuff, or whatever your personal interest is.
So I have a very good friend who's a nationally ranked cyclist, and she is having bone density issues. And so with these sorts of exercises in your bone density class, translate enough for a cyclist?
Yes,
Because
so
it's like completely different profile, right?
it is. So, that person could study with me. There's no problem. I had this same request about the bone density class. Somebody wants to invite their mother, who's a non-rider. And it's totally fine as long as the person doesn't mind all the riding lingo. So there's a lot of talk about riding that people just, I don't want to, if they like horses enough to not mind it, and and they say, okay, well, I'm with the horse people for this, it's fine. I don't know anyone teaching that work specifically for cyclists, but there are people teaching only Bones for Life.
Okay.
So then if they feel more comfortable with it, a very neutral Bones for Life, that's fine as well. But I will tell you that so I studied the Bones for Life in order to teach it, and the basic pieces that I'm teaching, I've used them for riders. There is some stuff that just I wouldn't suggest it for riders. So
I see.
yeah, it's just like that.
Prior to taking the-
Right. So I filtered through the things that would work and not work, and
Great, I'll pass that on.
yeah.
Thanks.
But definitely for Bones for Life, for anybody, could be beneficial. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Coming back to questions we had before about symmetry, did it help a little bit? Okay, good. And then, we realize that we're not stuck with the spine in a certain position, and then it's about patterns of shifting weight and equal options left and right versus I must be
Yeah.
symmetrical.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's what I do, is you must be symmetrical.
Yeah.
So lock in.
Yeah.
And just get it there and lock.
Yeah.
But really it's the flowing back and forth to find the position.
Yes. Wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
So I have a question about time for the Monday thing.
Yes.
Do you know around what time of day?
We're thinking 7 p.m. I will be able to send information out in the next days. I only do have 16 spots available. It's a lovely studio within this complex. Beautiful space, yoga studio, and they do fitness training there as well. So it's a really nice place. I loved it, and Michelle helped me find it, and I was like, wow, I love this place. I want to do the...
Doors down.
Yes. So
You
it's,
can do that online as well, right?
you can do it online.
Okay. Lynette's place?
Lynette's
Yes. So if you know the place, and I really like it. So yes, I'm happy if anyone says that they want to be one of the 16 people. You can talk to me later.
You said it's 2 months, like
It's
you're
2 months, yeah.
February
So
and in March.
I will give you the exact dates. I have to look at my phone for that.
Just 3 Mondays, right?
3 Mondays, so 6 classes. So basically there's a part 1 and a part 2. Very interesting and unique. In February and March, the dates are the same. So it would be on the Monday, the 13th, 20th, and 27th. And that's the same the following month. It's the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th.
And is that on the bone density? Or
Yes, the bone density. They'll be encompassing some of the things that we did today, but the focus is on the bone density. So in terms of a seat that you would end up with, much more upright, more tone, versus some of the Feldenkrais, it can deflate you. And I don't mean that to sound negative, but sometimes you have to take away the tension in order to find then the positive tension. But I do believe that the basic Feldenkrais, the flexors and the extensors and letting go for a lot of people is important. But I'm here now, and this is a course that I'm teaching online, and it's just an opportunity for me to be able to teach it live and in person. And again, sorry, go ahead.
How do you contact you to sign up?
So I can take sign-ups today if someone wants. There's a sign-up on my website for the online one, but that's only the online one. But if you wanted to sign up today and take one of the 16 spots, I would also include the online one, because then you can have recordings. But because there's only 16 spots, I want the people to come, because that's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.